Here with us, Mr. Sandeep Sibal from Qualcomm, who is here as a speaker at the 4G World India event. We have been talking about the 4G and, since morning we have been listening about the kind of ecosystem which needs to be nurtured to have a good 4G system in place. What is your vision? What is Qualcomm's vision for a great 4G ecosystem in India?
Yes, at Qualcomm we've been working very closely with our device OEM partners as well as with operators to enable and launch 3G over the course of the last 3 years. And we really plan to build on those strengths to now launch LTE. I think in terms of plans, we are seeing LTE launches globally. Of course, the developed markets have moved to LTE over the last few years. The developing markets and emerging markets are moving, as we speak. So as Indian operators begin to launch or have plans to launch LTE, we will work closely with them to ensure that we have good experiences on LTE, multi-mode LTE in particular, for end consumers. As you know, the chipsets that we develop and that are there inside the smartphones, as well as the technologies that we license, we've been working on for quite a while now. And much of the ecosystem that we built globally, we can leverage quite easily in India. The bands in India, in particular, the 2300 band for TDD and the 1800 band for FDD, which has just now come through the recent auctions, are both bands for which we have chipset support. In fact, 1800 is one of the most common bands globally at this point for LTE. So we should, we should be seeing many more smartphones launch supporting both 1800 and 2300 in the coming quarters.
So in the morning, a lot of operators talked about the budgeted smartphones, which are the key ingredients for the 4G success. What is Qualcomm's plans to reach to ensure that the budget smartphones are there in the market for a great success?
Yeah, in fact, we saw the same with 3G a couple of years ago. If you recall, when 3G first launched in India, most of those smartphones were well about 20,000 rupees, right? About $400, $500 and above. And of course, over the years, as we've seen, we now have 3G smartphones launching at 5,000 rupees. So prices have fallen, down substantially over the course of the last 3 years. We believe a similar dynamic will happen with LTE. Of course, at this point, the phones that have launched in India, the smartphones that have launched in India on Airtel, these are devices that are on the high tier. But if you look at our chipset roadmap, which I talked about in my talk earlier today, we actually have a series of chipsets that have now become commercial at various price points. It's not just the high tier. We have the high tier, we have the mid tier, and of course we have the volume tier. And I think the volume tier is what will drive the mass market and the budget smartphones that you talk about for India. Based on what we are seeing from the OEMs, we're going to see a lot more of these devices launch in the second half of this year. And certainly in 2015, we're going to see LTE smartphones in this budget tier launching in India. So we're very bullish on the LTE smartphone story globally. And as I mentioned earlier, this global ecosystem that we have for LTE will benefit us. And we should see the same effect that we saw on 3G on LTE now.
Right. And do you think that a lot of collaborative efforts are required to reach that particular level?
I think so. I think we have on the one hand, consumers clearly who want the 24/7 internet, on their hands, and we talked about this today. On the other hand, we also have the operators that are keen to launch 3G and LTE because, as you know, voice ARPUs are flattening out. They're seeing data as the primary driver for growth. And then finally, of course, the OEMs, which you talked about, offering smartphones. Now, all of these three actually form a virtuous cycle. The demand creates, of course, the drive for operators to launch 3G more deeply and introduce LTE, which in turn also drives the OEMs to focus on smartphones as opposed to feature phones. And that goes back to the consumers who then want more of the same. So we're seeing that virtuous cycle develop. And for LTE to launch well, we are working closely with the operators to ensure that both data and voice services, be it circuit switch fallback or voice over LTE, are properly engineered so that the experience to the end consumer is smooth. And of course, it's done in an efficient way so that battery life is conserved.
Right. Just one last question, sir. By when can we expect the mass availability of, budgeted LTE devices in India?
Like I said, I think globally, clearly we're seeing that movement towards multi-mode LTE. Right. That's essentially devices with LTE and with 3G. In India, I think it would be a combination of two factors. One is, of course, the OEMs launching and bringing these devices to India, which I think they already are. We heard from some of them earlier today. We heard Nokia, and I think we're going to hear from a couple other OEMs later today as well. On the operator side, I think the question is when will they launch in the other markets? We already have Airtel launching smartphone services in Bangalore, and the experience zones that we had set up in Bangalore clearly demonstrate that the end consumers really appreciate that experience, that instant access to the web, unbuffered streaming of HD content. So clearly what Airtel has seen as successful in Bangalore, that needs to be replicated in the other markets, by Airtel and with the other operators too. Reliance Jio, potentially Vodafone Idea, and many of the others as well. So as the operators begin to launch, that would create, of course, further impetus for the OEMs to launch budgeted phones in the market. So I don't have a specific date, but I'd be very surprised if we don't see a significant number of devices in the budget tier in the first half of 2015.
Yeah. Great, sir. Great. Thanks a ton for speaking with Light Reading India.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.